Welcome back to the stream, everyone. It's Danny Dhaiphong. As you can tell, I am a bit congested today, but I am feeling all right, and the show must go on. So, as you can see, I am joined by returning guest, special guest Scott Ritter, former UN Marine Corps intelligence officer, as well as the former UN weapons inspector. You can find his work at scottritterextra.com. Scott, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. It's tough enough to find time for a normal life. Just talking about the situation in between Russia and Ukraine, and now they've thrown in Israel and Hamas with the potential, depending on what Hezbollah does tomorrow. Nasrallah says in his speech, this thing could explode beyond anybody's wildest imaginations. This could become a problem bigger than your worst nightmare, and it's tough. I mean, and look here, all I'm doing is sitting on my butt, thousands of miles removed from these two tragic situations. Can't imagine, because Ukraine's been off the, just because we're not reading about it, just because we're not seeing it, doesn't mean it ain't happening. There's a major war going on right now between Russia and Ukraine, a major conflict that has hundreds of thousands of heavily armed men facing off on a very extensive front. There's continued bombardment of, the civilians in Donetsk. The Ukrainian civilians continue to suffer because of the consequences of this action. Billions of dollars continues to be squandered, but nobody's talking about it because we've got this new disaster, unfolding. What's going on in Gaza is just, I mean, it's a crime on a scale. Danny, I'm going on. I know I'm going on. You asked a simple question, and I'm probably getting way ahead of the script here. But just people need to understand that when you say what's going on in Gaza is a war crime, you have to understand that Israel's doctrine that was adopted in 2006, the Dahiwa, it's named after the West Beirut suburb that was leveled by Israel in 2006, leveled, not because Hezbollah was there, because Israel said, we're going to make everybody pay. That is a literal war crime, collective punishment. And then they enshrined it as their official policy, and they've been doing it in Gaza since 2008, a literal war crime. Israel says there's no such thing as a civilian, nothing. Everybody is viewed as that is a war crime. There's no defending this, none. I don't care how pro-Israel you think you are. If you're defending this, you're wrong, 100% wrong. And if you're an American defending it, shame on you. Shame on you. That's not who we are. That doesn't mean you're supporting terrorism. We can have a different discussion whether or not Hamas crosses that threshold and what happened October 7th. But let's just assume, for the sake of argument, you say, yes, Hamas is a terrorist organization. Okay. But that doesn't legitimize you going off and doing what you're doing. It's just like what happened on 9/11 doesn't legitimize torture in Guantanamo Bay. But we did it anyways. It's a national embarrassment. It's a disgrace, a stain on our reputation. And what Israel's doing right now in Gaza is a stain on theirs. But the difference is our stain, hopefully we'll be able to wash it off someday. The stain that Israel's putting on it might be the mark of death, because if Nasrallah makes a certain decision tomorrow, it's over for Israel. I don't think people understand that. Israel is on the brink of not just strategic defeat, but literal nation-destroying defeat. And no matter how you feel about Israel, you can't want that. I believe that political Zionism needs to go away. I believe that Israel has to change the way it does business. I believe that the day of Israeli exceptionalism is over, that Jews ain't supermen. They aren't the world's super race. God didn't make them better than you and me. And if you're an American and you buy into that crap, Again, shame on you. All men are created equal, sort of one of the foundational principles of this country. That means all men and women. I'm talking about humanity. We're all equal. Muslims, Christians, Jews. There ain't no superior race. There ain't no covenant between God and the Jews that allows them to do whatever the hell they want to do in Israel. Is there a need for an Israeli state, a Jewish homeland in the Middle East? Some would say yes, and I happen to agree with that. I believe that given the close linkage between the Hebrew faith, the Jewish faith, and the Holy Land, that there is a place for Jews in the Holy Land. And can that be place quantified as a state where Jewish religion is protected, the Jewish people? Sure it can. But it can't be done at the expense of the Palestinians. That can't happen. And that's what's happening now. That delegitimizes anything you want to think about Israel. And for all those Jewish people out there that are pro-Israel, understand that what you're doing right now is virtually guaranteeing the destruction of the Jewish state. And if this thing goes south, and I mean really south, as in Israel being swamped, which is about to happen, ladies and gentlemen. It's about to happen. Israel's about to get swamped. What you saw in the kibbutzes ain't nothing about what's going to happen. You don't want to see that. If you're pro-Jewish, if you're sympathetic, if you're just a human being, you don't want to see this. Insanity has taken hold in the Middle East. Insanity. And in the White House. Joe Biden should be on the phone right now. Literally, he has a few hours. When Nasrallah gives his speech, if Nasrallah goes the way he goes, we don't know that he is, but if he goes the way where he may go, it's over, done. It can stop now, but Biden has to get on the phone to Netanyahu. Two things: one, immediate ceasefire, immediate stop. Two, Netanyahu, resign, get the hell out of Dodge. You're finished. Those two things could save the world. Otherwise, Benjamin Netanyahu's narcissistic, spree that he's on right now could not only destroy Israel, guys, it could destroy the world. I mean, just put two and two together again, because Israel has this thing called the Samson option. And once they get swamped, nuclear weapons will fly. And once nuclear weapons fly, you can't tell me you know how this is going to end. You can't tell me that when a nuclear bomb goes off in Tehran, that somewhere in Islamabad, Pakistan, somebody doesn't say, unleash the beast on Israel. Pop, pop, pop. 3 nukes, Israel's gone. Everybody's dead. And once that happens, India, not understanding what happened, could end up preempting or sending a preemptive strike against Pakistan. Then the Chinese might get into this, and then we get into it. Then the Russians get it. Screw it, man. It's all dead. This might be your last broadcast, Danny. People, the world is literally moving in that direction. This is not stuff to be made fun of. The escalation ladder that can take place here is real. I'm scared. It takes a lot to scare me. I'm scared because I'm an analyst, and I get paid to think through problems and come up with options. And Nasrallah is a smart guy. So let's see what he does tomorrow. I think he understands the consequences, but I also think he understands that he's threading a fine line. I mean, Hezbollah, they're a Lebanese Shia organization that, has made its reputation on resistance against Israel. But lately they've been, together with Iran, they've been playing the Quds game, Jerusalem, Al-Aqsa Mosque. We're with our Palestinian brothers. We are one with Hamas and the cause. And they've been saying all this stuff. Now Hamas is at war. The Palestinian people are being murdered as we speak, slaughtered as we speak. And Nasrallah could very well find himself on the wrong end of, Muslim sentiment. And that's a bad place for Hezbollah to be. From a Hezbollah perspective, so he has to thread this fine line, and let's see what he does.
Yeah, yes, indeed. I mean, what you're speaking of is the huge implications of what Israel is doing right now, and I was in Vietnam when, I was able to cover it a little bit before I went to Vietnam, but it really escalated with talks of the ground operation constantly delayed. Now I believe Israel is doing some kind of piecemeal kind of ground operation with, it seems like Hamas and Palestinian resistance putting up a pretty good fight back. And so, with what you're referring to, which is Saeed Hassan Nasrallah's speech coming up tomorrow, head of Hezbollah, whether Hezbollah will formally intervene, they're engaged in some conflict with Israel at the moment along the border. But we've seen Yemen step in, send missiles over the border, hitting what some say are pretty significantly striking Israel. And now you're also seeing a lot of division in the United States over this. And I'm gonna get to some videos I have in a bit to show this. But what have you made of how things have progressed since October 7th? Because right now we have 10,000 plus Palestinians dead, 4,000 plus children. You have major agencies internationally, human rights groups calling this a genocide. You have people walking out of UN agencies because what they see is a genocide. How have you viewed this? Because I've seen you very active lately talking about this conflict. And so I'd like your reaction to just what's been going on and how Israel's been conducting itself.
Well, first of all, again, we have to understand that this didn't begin on October 7th. I'll talk about that in a second. This has been going on for decades now, but it's really been going on since 2005, 2006, 2007. That was when Hamas made the transition with Israeli concurrence from a terrorist organization. And look, I was in Israel from 1994 to 1998, off and on, I think 14 trips. And every time I was there, a terrorist act took place somewhere in Israel committed by Hamas. And these were straight up terrorist acts, bus bombings, suicide bombers at a discotheque, suicide bombers at a restaurant, suicide bombers at a shopping mall, all places that I frequented or were very close. So it sort of hit home when it goes boom, the glass, fortunately my glass didn't break, other glass did, but the glass rattles, ambulances show up, the blood's on the street. Yeah, it's there. They're a terrorist organization. You can talk about their cause all you want. I don't care. Terrorist organization. But in 2005, 2006, they made the transition. Israel made a decision to withdraw its settlements from Gaza. They withdrew the settlements from within Gaza, but then they reinforced the security belt outside Gaza. And people need to understand that the Gaza security belt is a combination of military bases, military fortifications, and fortified kibbutzes. The kibbutzes around Gaza are part of the security belt that strangles Gaza. They are militarized institute. This ain't some Iowa farm, mom and dad out there milking the cows every morning. This is a kibbutz full of, a lot of the soldiers are dormitoried there in the kibbutzes. The kibbutzes have military style self-security teams that patrol, are armed. And it's part of a system to pen in this. Plus the kibbutzes are built on land stolen from the Arabs, the relatives of whom live in Gaza. So let's stop pretending that there's a whole bunch of innocent civilians surrounding Gaza. There ain't nothing innocent about the kibbutzes. But since 2005, Hamas made that transition from terrorist organization into a governing organization, a political party, with the concurrence again and support of Israel. Israel wanted this. Now, why would Israel want this? Because Israel was trying to split the Palestinian movement. They didn't want a singular PLO-driven Palestinian Authority-driven political machine that could negotiate in a single voice in favor of a Palestinian state. They wanted to split the Palestinians, so they supported Hamas. Well, Hamas ended up doing pretty good. I think they won the majority of the seats in the Palestinian parliament, and this prompted a civil war between Hamas and Fatah, the military wing of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Fatah won on the West Bank, Hamas won in Gaza, and Hamas became the dominating or dominant power in Gaza. And so this is happening. That this 2006, 2007, when that civil war is taking place. In 2006, at the same time that this is happening there, Israel goes to war against Hezbollah. It started as a kidnapping of some Israeli soldiers, and because Israel was supposed to release a Hezbollah prisoner that they didn't, meant to be an exchange. It blew out. Israel sort of overreacted the way they did here. We're going to destroy Hezbollah. We're going to annihilate Hezbollah. This is it, the end of Hezbollah. We're going in. They mobilized. They went in, and Hezbollah kicked their ass. 33 days later, Israel had to withdraw and say, we can't do it. It was a lesson. But part of what happened in 2006 is how the creation of the Dhaiphong principle. The Israeli commander of the northern command basically said, we're treating every village, every town, every place as hostile. We're taking it out. And they began this process of collective punishment. So that's a big date. In 2008, they took the Dhaiphong principle to Gaza, where they began punishing the Gazans. And they've been punishing the Gazans ever since in a series of escalating conflicts. 2014 was a big one where Israel made a ground incursion into Gaza, sort of got slapped around a little bit, lost a bunch of guys, had to pull back. They've been 2020, 2021. They had, I think 2021, something interesting happened. Israel basically, they're very casualty averse. They learned their lesson in 2014 that you can't go into Gaza. So they've been collecting a lot of intelligence information. They built this huge intelligence collection apparatus. They built a wall around Gaza that's designed to prevent tunnels from going underneath, collecting everything. It's too much data for the average Israeli intelligence analyst to handle. So they computerized it, they digitized it, and they built artificial intelligence algorithms that were designed to assess the data and make predictions, issue reports. And Israel bragged about this. They said it was the first artificial intelligence war in 2021. And they held seminars about it. Now, Hamas is sitting there going, really? Artificial intelligence? Tell us more about that. And Israel did, because they're bragging about it. They're holding conference after conference, publicly paper after paper. And Hamas is sitting there taking notes. And what Hamas was able to do because of all this is build a system designed to spoof the computer. And Hamas fooled the computer. The computer was blind. Sometimes the way you blind a computer is you just do it in the obvious. A lot of criminals will tell you that the easiest way to steal something is just to walk in and steal it. Just do it. Don't try and dress up. Just act natural. Go in and pretend it's yours and keep going. And most times people won't see it. But if you start looking suspicious, people say, he's looking suspicious. Well, Hamas went, what the hell? Let's just practice storming a kibbutz by building a fake kibbutz over here. Everybody's collecting it, but because Hamas is doing it normally, the computer's going, nothing to see here, boys. They assaulted it. Nothing to see here, boys. They practiced paraglide operations. Nothing to see here, boys. It's just all in the open. Then they also ran fake communications with the real communications taking place by courier or landline so that the Unit 8200 couldn't. Next thing you know, October 7th occurs. Took the Israelis totally by surprise. Not totally. I mean, again, here's the irony of it. The collectors are looking at all this stuff, and they're going, hey, boss, we got a problem. They're assaulting a village that looks a lot like the kibbutz that I live in. We're a little worried about that. Boss, they've been running rehearsals coming up to the fence. Looks like they're practicing placing explosives. And they wrote all this report. The night before, on October 6th, going into early morning hours of October 7th, the Israeli high command was meeting. I'm talking about the head of Mossad, the head of Amman, the general staff. They're meeting, reading these reports because some good Israeli intelligence officer said, they're coming over the fence tomorrow, boss. It's all over. And they read it and they read it and read it. And they said, no, man, the computer says no. And we believe that Hamas has bought into peace. We bribed them with 20,000 work permits. They're making money. And, obviously Hamas will never do something like this. Then they said, why don't we go to sleep? We're not going to put anybody on alert. We're not going to call anybody back from the holidays. And we'll talk about it in the morning. Well, in the morning, they were talking about something totally different, which is Hamas coming over the wire. Hamas launched one of the most professional military operations the world has ever seen. Okay, ask the 13th Battalion, the 51st Battalion of the Golani Brigade if this was a bunch of ragtag terrorists coming over the wall. These are two of Israel's so-called elite infantry formations, and they got bitch slapped by Hamas. Bitch slapped. Hamas penetrated the wall, I don't 24 points, came storming in some places. Of course, they got held back. The Israeli, nobody's perfect. They got held back. Other places they penetrated in. They knew exactly where to go. The intelligence was pinpoint perfect. And they slaughtered the Israelis. One of the goals of Hamas's mission was to take hostages. Why? Because Israel is holding on to 5,000 plus Palestinians in prison. Most of them haven't been charged with a crime. There's no due process taking place. They've just been put in jail. That's not, again, no one talks about that. So Hamas took hostages. The idea was to exchange them. They have a history of doing that kind of exchange. They did it. But the other thing that Hamas was doing is changing the paradigm. You see, what was happening in the lead up to this was the full implementation of the Abraham Accords. That is the agreement negotiated between Donald Trump's presidency, Israel, and the Gulf Arab states. The idea of which is to create the conditions for a Palestinian state. But if you read the Abraham Accord, it means there will never be a Palestinian state. It's designed not to have a Palestinian state. It's just political cover so that Israel can normalize relations with the Gulf Arab states, Bahrain, Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, and they were on the verge of signing a normalization agreement with Saudi Arabia. And had that been penned, there would never be a Palestinian state. It was over, never going to happen. Hamas had no choice. If they believed in a Palestinian state, if they believed in a future that would have a Palestinian state, they had no choice but to do what they do. And what can they do? It's not meant to be a minor attack. It's meant to be attack on the scope and scale of which that Israel would do exactly what Israel's doing right now. Please, people, understand. This ain't an Israeli victory. This isn't Israel flexing. Israel's walking right into the trap set by Hamas. Israel's doing a couple things. One, they're killing a lot of civilians. Look, let's just be straight up honest here. Hamas knew that was going to happen. Hamas almost wanted that to happen. They needed that to happen. Why? How do you win over international public opinion? By letting Israel drop 6 2,000-pound JDAMs on a crowded refugee camp. Okay, there's no military justification for that. This is just Israel doing what they always said they're going to, collective punishment. Don't believe a damn word Israel says when they say, oh, there was a Hamas terrorist underground someplace. They didn't know where the guy was. They dropped 6 2,000-pound bombs. This isn't precision strike, ladies and gentlemen. This is area bombardment in a very specific area designed to kill a whole bunch of people, and they did. This is what's going on and on and on. And the world has flipped. You don't see large-scale demonstrations in the street for Israel today. You see it for Palestine. You see it for Hamas. Hamas has become the hero organization. Hamas has become the resistance organization. Turkey has said, these are mujahid. These are freedom fighters. These are resistance fighters. They're not terrorists. And the world's buying into this because of Israel's overreaction. And now look at what's happened. Joe Biden, very staunch pro-Israel kind of guy, gave a speech where he said, when this is over, we're not returning to October 6th status quo, meaning that the Abraham Accords are dead. He said there will be a Palestinian state. There has to be a Palestinian state. Hamas has already won the war because that's on the table, but now they have to follow through. And the other thing is, I don't think Hamas wants Hezbollah to intervene. I don't think Hamas triggered this to kill Israel. Hamas triggered this to get the Abraham Accord killed, to get Israel to the negotiating table. Hamas has told Iran, everybody's going, oh no, this was coordinated with Iran and Hezbollah. No, it wasn't. Hezbollah and Iran didn't know anything about this. They were taken by surprise by this. And you can tell by the way they're reacting. Hamas has said to the Iranians, don't intervene. We got this under control. We're not panicking. We know what we're doing. We're bringing them in, and then we're going to chew them up, and they're going to have to leave. They're going to leave because we're kicking their ass, and they're going to leave because the world is turning on them. And then at the end result, we get a Palestinian state. But Hezbollah and Iran have, built up this whole notion that they are backing the Palestinian people, and now they're stuck. they're stuck with in between a narrative, because if they don't do something, they're seen as being weak. The Hamas becomes the heroes. They become lesser. It's a very, very dangerous situation. But if for a minute you think that Hamas is a terrorist organization and Israel is the aggrieved party, you know nothing about the history of this conflict. First of all, the Russian ambassador to the United Nations was 100% correct. Israel doesn't get to talk self-defense. You don't get to talk self-defense when you're the occupier. You don't get to say, I'm defending myself from the occupied. Whatever Israel is responding to that they're calling a threat, it can't derive from within the territory that's being occupied. The International Criminal Court, the International Justice Court in 2004 made this very clear. Israel does not get to cite self-defense. They can't cite self-defense. They can't cite military necessity because they're on the wrong side of history here. And we also have to be careful about all these allegations out there. If you go back and study World War I, when the Germans marched through Belgium, there was this whole thing of atrocity propaganda taking place where, the Germans were slitting open the bellies of the Belgian women, raping the Belgian nuns, bayoneting the Belgian children. None of it was true. None of it was true. And now the Israelis are out there saying this, that, and the other thing happened. No, ladies and gentlemen, don't believe it. Wait, Scott, I've seen the building with the burned bodies. Yeah, but you know that building was struck by tank fire, not Hamas fire. That the head of security for the largest kibbutz, Be'eri, I think it was, has said that the Israeli IDF came in with tanks and was taking down the building, slaughtering our own people. There's a survivor who said, I was in a house with 20 Jewish hostages, 8 Hamas guys. Hamas guys wanted to surrender. The Israelis hit us with tank fire, killing 8 Hamas guys, 18 Jews. 1 Israeli survivor is wounded. I'm the only one who came out clean. This is the truth. Those kids that were out there in the rave, I say kids, half of them were active duty Israeli, the Defense Force people out there partying. And the other half had just gotten out of the Israeli Defense Force. These are military age people. Many of them were armed. There was a huge crossfire between Israeli security forces and Hamas.
Right. I was going to say that
in the middle, and the vast majority of the people that died that day weren't killed by Hamas. So let's just knock this crap off. Okay, Israel right now is running a huge propaganda exercise trying to win over the world, and it ain't working. It ain't working.
Yeah, and you mentioned the rave, and now there's footage that does show that exact crossfire that you were describing. And even Haaretz has an article out, and as you can see, there's a huge alarm bells over this. But there's an article by Haaretz that, a liberal Zionist publication, that as it's eulogizing all the fallen Israelis from October 7th, it admits that there are far fewer than what the IDF are proclaiming. And so there's so much footage now showing that, Israel has really overstepped its bounds and exposed itself, because it also has the Hannibal Directive. So you were talking about Israel's strategy. It has a Hannibal Directive, which says that Israel is not really bound to protect the so-called hostages or prisoners of war that have been captured. They don't have any duty to protect them. So oftentimes their number one priority is to just slay, and slaughter on the scene. And that leads to deaths of Israelis themselves. So this is a really ugly scene that, I don't think anyone could have predicted would have happened now, but I think you may bring up a really good point about the Saudi-Israel normalization process. The timing of this is, to me, ingenious, because Israel has committed these atrocities and is committing an actual genocide right now. And that has absolutely killed this normalization process, probably indefinitely. I mean, that's what Saudi Arabia says. But the situation does not look good.
They said that it. Saudi Arabia is. They're playing this pretty in an interesting fashion, because they didn't jump on the. They didn't do the Bahrain thing. Bahrain just
Right.
One of the first people to normalize relations. Bahrain just shut down diplomatic relations, kicked out the Israeli ambassador, said, "We're done. We're finished." Saudi Arabia could have done that, but in doing that, you take all the leverage out because, you know, I think Saudi Arabia understands that this is the chance to get a Palestinian state. That from this disaster that's taking place, there can be a Palestinian state. So what they said is not only they didn't say, you know, we will resume negotiations down the road when this is done, which would have been reasonable. They said we'll continue talking right now. We'll continue to meet with Israel right now to talk about normalization, but understand there will never be normalization until there's a Palestinian state. And so they're making the linkage there so that if Israel knows that if Israel comes to the table and talks to Saudi Arabia, that a state for Palestine, statehood for Palestine will be part of the negotiation. Israel's really shot itself not just in the foot, but in the knees, in the hip, you know, in the gut. They've done everything wrong here. They've done nothing right.
Indeed, indeed. And perhaps we can return to the military component here because, you know, the IDF has been championed as one of the strongest militaries in the world. It's almost infallible given how weaponized it has become, how much US backing it has, and of course, how much catastrophe and devastation it can cause, which we are seeing right now in the bombardment of Gaza. But you have said earlier and repeatedly on other programs on X and in your writing that this is really Israel's undoing. So, how is it then that Palestinian resistance, which doesn't have anywhere near the fraction of the backing, Hamas, no matter how many weapons it has and how genius it is nowhere near the so-called military might of the IDF? How is it that they're able to do this? And how is it that it looks like Israel is the one on the brink and not Palestine and its resistance?
Yeah, well, I mean, we have to look at a couple things. One, the United States has made it part of our strategy towards Israel to ensure that Israel has technological, not just superiority, but supremacy, meaning that the weapon systems available to Israel will always far outclass anything that its potential adversaries will have. So we've been, you know, providing Israel with the F-35 eyes. You know, they're improved to deal with the Israeli way of doing business. We've given them all the bombs they want, these JDAMs, these satellite guided bombs. We've worked with them to build the Iron Dome anti-missile shield, the Merkava tank, and their armored personnel carriers are designed for the modern battlefield, considered to be the best tanks in the world. You know, so it's all this technology that's put to bear. And then Israel also combines that with a very heavy reliance on intelligence, like human intelligence, technical intelligence, et cetera, to tip things off. And then they have a very aggressive doctrine to go out and try and preempt issues before they happen. They have a handful of units that are pretty good. Sariyat Matkal, the General Reconnaissance Unit. A lot of people say it's the equivalent of Delta Force. Let me just set you guys straight here. Sariyat Matkal is decent, but they're young kids with very little experience. They've got some old seasoned hands in there, but the average age of Delta Force is around 35 years old. These are guys that enlisted when they were 18. And so they've already been in the Army for 20 years. They've gone through Ranger training, Special Forces training. They have a couple combat tours. So they're very mature players by the time they join Delta. Sariyat Matkal isn't anywhere near Delta Force in terms of the quality of their thing. They have legendary status based upon some things they've done, like the Entebbe rescue and things of that nature. But when you read the actual histories of their operational details of Sariyat Matkal's operations, they're not Supermen. They make a lot of mistakes. They've suffered horrendous casualties so far in this campaign. The IDF is casualty averse, meaning every army is casualty averse. I mean, it's nobody wants to die, but you accept the risks, meaning that, look at the Taliban. Ask the Taliban when the Taliban spoke about U.S. Marines. They said, we don't like to fight Marines. Why? Because when we shot at the Marines, they ran towards the guns. They came at us and they kept coming towards us till they found who shot them and killed them. And we got tired of running away and dying. Now, the Marines suffered casualties because that kind of aggression leads to casualties, but the Marines prevailed. That's how you win the battlefield, by being aggressive. The Israelis have removed aggression from that. Their forces are very passive. Plus, again, a Marine, 13 weeks of basic training, another dozen weeks of advanced individual training. Then you join the unit, your battalion. You're going to get 6 to 8 months of welcome aboard, then 6 more months of pre-deployment training, and then you're going to deploy. But when you deploy in that battalion, you may be the rookie, but you're surrounded by a unit with guys that have been in for 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 years. We've done multiple tours, so it's a very combat hardened unit, a combat capable unit. Your Israeli battalion is composed exclusively, with the exception of some NCOs and senior officers, of conscripts, guys that are in for 2.5 years. You can't be a good soldier in 2.5 years. You can't be. You can't. It can't happen. You can't be a good combat team in 2.5 years. And that's the entire Israeli military. Again, with the exception of some NCOs and some officers. Your average Israeli is a 18, 19, 20-year-old kid who, they aren't combat hardened. The Israelis are very technological. Their military isn't designed to, attract, the toughest and the roughest. Who's the smartest guy here? How can we outsmart the enemy? None of them want to die. Nobody wants to die, but none of them are out there saying, to the guns, to the guns, to the guns. That's why Hamas did so well against the Golani Brigade, the elite infantry unit, 13th and 51st Battalion, slapped around. These Israeli forces, they're going to make a lot of mistakes. They haven't been training to do the fighting that they've been doing. They don't spend a lot of time in the field wearing 70 pounds of personal protective gear. They don't run around, and they're not hard men. They're soft men. And they start to make mistakes. And you see a lot of these mistakes being made right now in Gaza. These guys aren't that good. You know who's good? Hamas, especially the frontline brigades or combat units. They're very good, very physically fit, motivated. There's a video making the rounds right now that looks to be accurate. It shows a 2-man anti-tank crew coming out of one of the tunnels, coming up. They run up to one of the Merkava tanks. The cojones on this guy, and he's saying sort of the Arabic death prayer because he's expecting not to make it. But he runs up to the tank and he places an explosive device on the tank, not to destroy the tank, but to destroy the protective system, because the tanks have these radars and these reactive devices, so that if you shoot an anti-tank round at it, it detects that movement and then blows shotgun shells, buckshot this way to set off the shaped charge, so that when it hits, it's not taking out the tank. So they went in, placed that by hand right where it needed to be placed to blow up that system, the trophy system, I think it's called. And then the other guy came out and popped it with the anti-tank system. I mean, those are big brass, whats, man. I mean, that's something. And these guys are smart enough to know what they have to do. They've clearly practiced this before, and now they're executing it flawlessly. Now, I'm sure that there's a bunch of guys that tried this and didn't make it. I'm sure, because these guys had the go cam. So we're watching the team that made it. I guarantee you there's 100 dead Hamas fighters, guys who crawled out of a hole and started running towards a tank to be detected by the Israelis, and they got machine gunned down. They're not supermen, they're not immortal, but there's a lot of them, and they are very aggressive, and they know what they're doing. Israel is moving into their territory. The Israeli troops are scared. Look, again, another video. Hamas sends out a drone with, like you see all the time out of Ukraine, with the grenade dangling below it, and it comes in. There's an Israeli unit that's cleared out of space. Now, I don't know what the hell. This is a combat zone. So even if you don't expect a drone to fly over, mortars, mortars, mortars. I mean, come on, guys, but they're all clustered together in the middle having lunch. They're all like sitting there together. Dude, you should be dug in facing outward. One or two men per hole, spacing, cover, so that if they get a lucky round in, you only lose two guys. Said they're all dumped up there. Had the grenade been 5 meters to the left, they would have killed a whole bunch more people. As it is, it landed, took down about 8 of them. Professional soldiers don't do that. Professional soldiers don't behave. The Israelis right now are reservists. They're fat guys who have come off of a couple years out of the military. They've now been called back up. They don't want to be there. They're not trained for this. They're not physically fit for this. They're not mentally prepared for this. And they're getting ready to enter into a fight that only the strongest can survive. The Israeli Defense Force just is not a very good unit. And Hamas is good. You know who's better? Hezbollah. And if Hezbollah decides to engage, I don't think people picked up on what happened yesterday. Hezbollah, and the Israelis talked about it. Hezbollah released, I think, 4 different kinds of weapons yesterday that they've been holding on to. These are weapons that Israel can't stop. These are precision weapons. They did it in a way that Israel knew about it, because the Israeli went, we're seeing things coming out of Hezbollah that we've never seen before, and it's scaring us to death because they're killing our guys and we can't stop it. This is a weapon we can't stop. We're not prepared for this. We've never expected this. And if you think if Hezbollah's just doing that, how many more of those do they have? New weapons that Israel's not ready for. And the Hezbollah fighters are they're better trained than the Hamas fighters. Israel's in a lot of trouble because their army just isn't that good. And once the mythology of Israeli invincibility is burst, it's over.
Yeah, and there's a lot to be said as you were describing the battle-hardened skills and spirit of an organization like Hezbollah and even Hamas, both of which have been fighting protracted wars for quite a long time, while the IDF has been fighting, as you said, in a very different way. And it really is not looking good for Israel. But I wanted to also talk about this regional war. So you're talking about Hezbollah. You mentioned Iran. There's a lot of pressure on countries around the world, and especially in that region. Where do you see this going? I know that you said that Hezbollah face a lot of pressure, but I don't think it's a guarantee that they will enter in full force.
I agree. Yeah.
Where do you see this going exactly? Because I agree with you in terms of Hamas's purpose. I don't think was to eliminate or eradicate Israel. I don't think that was really ever in the cards, given just the state of things for Palestine. But at the same time, this has been a long-standing problem historically. This is a long historical problem, many, 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 many decades, since 1948, arguably. How does this end? Biden's talking about a pause. There's a lot of pressure on the United States. The European states are all over the place. Lots of divides there. How do you see this ending?
Well, I've spent all day researching and writing an article that I hope to get published tomorrow. That's about basically the escalation ladder. And I'll just talk about, because I find it fascinating, but I'm a nerd, so what the hell. But your standard single prong escalation ladder basically is logical, meaning that you start down here in peace, you finish up here in war, and it's just it's the steps to take to advance. What has to happen in terms of provocation? What makes you move from a peaceful thing to a prepared stance? Something had to trigger that. Then what would it take to prepare you to being even more prepared, than to preempt and then to be in full scale war? How do you run up that escalation ladder? But that very rarely happens. You very rarely get the single strand. oftentimes you get multiple strands. And a lot of times they use this in business. For instance, that you have people talking about global warming and climate change policy. And then so you can't just say, what is our strategy for oil? Because you need, as your strategy for oil progresses, it impacts your strategy for nuclear energy, which impacts your strategy for renewable energy. And so the three things have to coordinate with each other. And that's what we're looking at right now. We have Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran. Now, there's each one of those can break down to different. For instance, Hamas, Hezbollah, but Hezbollah isn't just Hezbollah, because when we speak of the Lebanese border, there's a Lebanese Hamas out there. They just fired some weapons today. They're hooking and jabbing. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad is operating out of Lebanon. There's other Palestinian factions operating out of Lebanon, and Hezbollah is trying to control them. So even within Hezbollah, there's, different ladders going up. Iran, they deal with the Syrian and Iraqi Shia militias, which are responsive to Iran, but also the Houthi. And we just saw the Houthi just decide the hell with it. They went, screw it, we're going to war, launch the missiles. And Iran's going, what? Don't launch the missiles. Don't launch the missiles, because you just screwed up my escalation ladder. I'm sitting here because Iran's talking to the United States. You know this. The Iran foreign minister came to New York. Okay, there were conversations, direct conversations, the kind of conversations that have to take place, which is, hey, guys, Israel screwed up. Right now, I got a whole bunch of screaming memes in Syria and Iraq that are screaming for your blood, and they're going to get it. Now, the question is, how are you going to respond? Because we're going to try and slow them down, but we can't stop them. There has to be a pressure relief valve. The pressure relief valve is they're going to get to fire some drones and rockets against your bases. You're going to take casualties. So you get to bomb our stuff, and we're going to take casualties. This is how we're going to control. We're going to work our escalation up here, but we're doing it in a way to relieve pressure, not increase pressure. It's a pressure relief system, which works until the Houthi starts firing rockets. Now the Americans have to start shooting that down and change the equation, and now you see the escalation go up, but it wasn't intended to go up. And now Hezbollah is sitting there going, damn it, they're out there, hooking and jabbing in the deserts of Syria and Iraq, and we're here. We got to start. And Hezbollah is working with Iran to communicate through their various channels to both Israel, because Hezbollah has a direct line with the Israelis. They have a direct line with Israel. I'm just telling you right now, they do. And Hezbollah is telling the Israelis, we're going to kill about 40 of you guys the next week, and you're going to kill about 50 of our guys, and we're just going to let it hang with there, okay? We don't want this thing to get out of control. We're going to limit the battlefield here, limited scope, escalation ladder. Meanwhile, Hamas is out there doing their thing, and Israel overreacts by blowing up a refugee camp. Boom! Enraged people more. Now you got to bring the escalation ladder up even more to relieve the pressure, because that's all this is. It's a pressure relief system, and you keep increasing the pressure. And this is where we're at right now. A very, very dangerous system. The United States is deploying, in the process of deploying 2 aircraft carriers, a Marine Amphibious Readiness Group, a whole bunch of ships off the coast. You guys, I hope everybody understands that's nothing. Literally, it's zero combat power. Scott, they have hundreds of airplanes. Yeah, so what? What are they going to do? You think the United States are going to fly multiple combat sorties against Hezbollah? Because the second they do that, Iran gets involved. And you know what isn't going to happen? America's not going to beat Iran. Can't happen. Donald Trump tried to flex that muscle. Remember when they shot down the RQ-4 Global Hawk? And Trump was saying, we got to strike the Iranian defense systems. And the Pentagon went up to him and said, boss, you do that, and the escalation ladder kicks in. And what's going to happen is you're going to hit them, they're going to hit us. Now you're going to get pissed, because when they hit us, they're going to sink a ship. And when they sink a ship and you got 300 dead sailors, you're going to say, hit them hard. And when you hit them hard, you're going to say, hit their oil. Then they're going to hit Saudi Arabian oil. And then it's all over because the economy sunk. And now we're in a general war with Iran, and we don't have the troops to do that. It's going to take us 9 to 12 months just to generate this power. Now we got to move the power overseas into the Middle East. This ain't Desert Storm. We don't have ports that are going to receive us without fire. The Iranians are going to be taking out the ports, sinking the ships, blowing up the airfields. 900,000 men is what it's going to take. And even then, there's no guarantee of victory. We know this because we've been through this before. It's not like, Joe Biden is going, hey, what happens if we go to war against Iran? It was just a couple of years ago, and the Pentagon goes, we got the answer to that one, boss. We lose. So all this deployment of forces is purely for political show, for domestic political consumption. So Joe Biden can say, I'm doing something, but he's doing nothing. It's all part of the game. The thing that screwed this up beyond belief is what Israel did to the Jabalia refugee camp, Jamalia,
I think.
Jabalia.
I'm not. I'm just guessing from the
Jabalia. No, I think you're right. Jabalia. I'm pretty bad with names. I mispronounce everything. But the Jabalia refugee camp, there was no justification for 6 2,000-pound JDAMs dropped the way they did. The pressure, whatever speech, because Hezbollah, they're masters of propaganda, and they put out these slick little videos that showed, Nasrallah's glasses on the table, and Nasrallah putting on his glasses, and Nasrallah leafing through his papers, and and all this stuff, very ominous music, and everybody's going, oh Christ, what's Nasrallah thinking? Well, that was before the refugee camp. Then it got bombed, and I can guarantee you whatever he was working on got ripped up, thrown out, and rewritten, because it changes everything. This is why I think Joe Biden is on the phone right now with Netanyahu saying, if you don't allow for a ceasefire like soon, this thing could spin out of control. But now let's talk about Hezbollah for a second. We talked about the escalation ladder. Hezbollah's trajectory, Hezbollah was doing what Israel wanted Hamas to do, transition into governance. Hezbollah is heavily vested in the politics of Lebanon. They are a major political party, one of the major political parties. They have a serious role to play in the government of Lebanon. They're one of the few rational actors in terms of governance. They are not corrupted like the Sunni and the Christians are, or even the Druze or the Amal Shia. Hezbollah is relatively corruption-free, at least comparatively. And they are positioned themselves to be, sort of the kingmakers in Lebanon. This is where they wanted to be, because that's how they can take care of the Shia population. That's the trajectory they wanted. Lebanon itself as a nation is in crisis, severe economic crisis. This is the chance for Hezbollah to flex its political muscles to help resolve that crisis. The last thing Hezbollah wanted was what's happening right now in Gaza. They had already written off Palestine. They make their little videos about Quds and Al-Aqsa and all this kind of stuff, but Hezbollah had already written off Palestine. The whole world had written off. Nobody was talking about a Palestinian state on October 6th. Nobody. Even the pro-Palestinian people stopped talking about it because it was dead. It was a dead issue. It wasn't going to happen. And so now Hezbollah, they don't want to go to war against it. But here's the problem. The myth of Israeli invincibility has been busted. It's clear now that Israel is the weakest it's ever been. When you look at Israel, remember, again, the other thing that people tend to forget is Benjamin Netanyahu is probably the second most corrupt politician in the world after Zelensky. He's been called out by the Israeli justice system. If he goes to trial, he's found guilty. He's going to jail, maybe for the rest of his pathetic little life. That's the reality. So what is he doing? He's conspiring. He's built this far-right coalition where he's promised them, settlements and beating up Palestinians, kill a Palestinian for free day. Literally, the settlers go out and they just pop off Palestinians. It's criminal what's happened. Over 200 killed so far this year. No one talks about that. 200 Palestinians murdered by Israeli settlers in the West Bank this year. So, this is what is going on. Netanyahu comes in, and in order to stay in power, they rewrite Israeli basic law. They're supposed to be, it's a democracy. It ain't a democracy. Democracies have checks and balances. The key aspect of that is independent legislature, executive, and the judiciary. Well, when the executive and the legislature conspire to eliminate the independence of the judiciary to ensure that the legislature can impeach a judge if the judge does something they don't want them to do, like take a prosecution against a corrupt prime minister. And so this is happening. So Israel blew up. There were hundreds of thousands of demonstrators in the streets marching against Benjamin Netanyahu. The president of Israel was saying that there's a real chance that Israel will have a civil war, that is, Jew killing Jew in Israel. He said it's not a joke. This country is split. This country is divided. So you have this politically frail country where people were saying, God, what happens if we get tested? What happens if Hamas rises up? What happens if Hezbollah rises up? What happens if Iran? Is this country capable of? But everyone's like, don't worry. The Israeli Defense Force is here to save you. Except they weren't. Thousands of Israeli reservists said, we ain't serving under Netanyahu. We're not going to fly. Ain't going to happen. Meanwhile, the Israelis tested this vaunted IDF system in a full-scale stress test with everything blowing up at once. 2 exercises, Chariots of Fire last year, Firm Hand this year. Guess what, guys? They lost. They can't do it. They don't have the capacity to do it. So Israel, now you're Nasrallah. And you're looking at it, and somewhere, I guarantee in his staff, there's the Hezbollah version of Scott Ritter, who's sitting there going, boss, this is it. We can beat them. You know those tunnels we've dug under where we can inject 30,000 guys overnight into northern Israel? You always said you didn't want to do it because you were concerned that once they got out there, the Israelis could counterattack and we'd lose all our guys. 300,000 guys are stuck in Gaza right now. They got nothing to counterattack with. They got 70,000 troops up front. They ain't got nothing in the rear. This is the time, boss. Flood it. We can seize northern Israel. We can get up to Haifa. We can take it down to the Sea of Galilee. We can work with the Syrians to recapture not just Sheba Farms, which is something near and dear to our hearts, but we can get the Golan Heights, boss. This is it. This is our chance. We can do it. We can do it. We can do it. And they can do it. There's no doubt about it that if Hezbollah decides to do this, it's all over for Israel. So now Nasrallah is sitting there going, damn, I was on this direction of governance, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to destroy Israel. What do I do? So they're calling up the Iranians saying, what do we do? And the Iranians are sitting there going, damn, we just made peace with the Saudis. The Chinese did this. We've now pivoted economically to the east. We've joined BRICS. We've joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. We're a nation whose economy is finally building up. We've been promising the Iranian people that there will be prosperity, and now we're headed down the path of prosperity. Everything's looking really good, and now you throw this at me because now you're telling me that our arch enemy Israel is ripe for the picking. These are the kind of debates that are taking place right now in Beirut or wherever Nasrallah is hiding, and in Tehran, or they may have moved to Mashhad right now because when this thing goes bad, that government's going underground. This is the debate that's taking place because Israel's never been as weak as they are today. Never. They are ripe fruit ready to be plucked from the tree. For anybody who has the balls to do it. But is it the right move? Again, I don't believe it's the right move. I have to be honest and sit here and say that even if I was advising Hezbollah or advising Tehran, I'd say it's the wrong move. That the best bet right now is to do what Hamas wants. Hamas wants an independent Palestinian state. Hamas wants 5,000 prisoners freed. Hamas wants Al-Aqsa to be left alone. Hamas has some very reasonable, limited objectives. They are not talking about the destruction of Israel. We should respect that. Because if Hamas ain't talking about the destruction of Israel, we shouldn't be in the business of destroying Israel. And I think that's the direction they want to go. But we don't know the pressures that are under, that Nasrallah is under right now. This speech tomorrow is going to be a very, very important speech.
It certainly is a pressure cooker of Israel's doing. And we've touched on the geopolitics, the military side of this, some of the political ramifications of all of that. We've touched only a little, though, on and you talk about this a lot, war is an extension of politics, but also the information war. We've talked a little bit about that. But I don't think, and maybe we can begin here and also close off our conversation about this particular situation. I don't think in my lifetime in Israel has been quite brutal in my lifetime in many different occasions. Has the public relations been so poor for Israel? I mean, even in these past incursions into Gaza, past bombing campaigns, even when there were massive numbers of Palestinians being killed, there was this justification, whether it was Hamas, terrorism, or whether it was just the spirit of Zionism that really held and stuck, especially in the West. And it was easy to kind of put Palestinians aside. It seems like the energy against Israel is stronger. And I think that's both cumulative over the years, more and more people, especially American Jews, getting kind of fed up with the war crimes. But also, I think it has to do with right now how Israel is being portrayed and also how the United States is kind of not helping the situation. I wanted to play a video of your favorite politician, a little small clip, Lindsey Graham. I hope I don't send you to the hospital because I know you you despise Lindsey Graham. But I think uh, he's kind of emblematic of what we are seeing in terms of the doubling down. And so I'm going to play a small clip for you to react to because I think this is a huge problem for the United States and for Israel in terms of just how it's coming off in the world and how I believe, and I want your reaction to this, how it is also contributing to the already existing weaknesses that you've pointed out to for Israel. But here we go.
Is there a threshold for you, and do you think there should be one for the United States government, at which the U.S. would say, let's hold off for a second in terms of civilian casualties? Is there a point at which you would start to question?
No, if somebody asked us after World War II, is there a limit what you would do to make sure that Japan and Germany don't conquer the world? Is there any limit what Israel should do to the people who are trying to slaughter the Jews? The answer is no. There is no limit. But here's what you need to do: be smart. Let's try to limit civilian casualties the best we can. Let's put humanitarian aid in areas that protect the innocent. I'm all for that. But this idea that Israel has to apologize for attacking Hamas, who's embedded with their own population, needs to stop. The goal is to destroy Hamas. Hamas is creating these casualties, not Israel.
I don't think anyone's
civilian casualties.
So, your reaction, Scott?
Well, I just want to point out that Lindsey Graham is a lawyer, and he's a U.S. Air Force lawyer, which means that he has been versed in the laws of war. He knows, for instance, the principle of distinction. Lindsey, I hope I'm schooling you if you're watching, you perfume pansy. Listen to what I'm saying. Distinction. That means that before you drop a bomb, and you know this, Lindsey, you know this because I know you did a tour in Afghanistan where you provided, you were there to help the drunk airmen and the rapists because you weren't good enough to advise combatant leaders because you suck as a lawyer. And I'm just being honest. That's all he did is, out-process bad airmen. But he has been schooled. He knows what distinction is. And you can't drop a bomb. You can't put a round down range unless you've made a distinction between civilian and military. Now, yeah, if there's commingling, you've got issues. And then the concept of proportionality comes in. What's proportional? For instance, to take out one Hamas leader who wasn't, he was a regional, battalion commander, the guy that was supposedly at this refugee camp. There's no way America would ever allow the issue of proportionality to come in and say, we're going to put a bomb on target there that's going to kill 400 people to get one battalion commander. That's disproportional use of force, and that would be rejected. Any American who did that would be prosecuted for violating the laws of war. Lindsey knows this. He's better than that. But see, he's a politician. He's the slimiest kind of politician. He's a politician that's been pushing war forever. He operates totally outside the framework of law. He knows that everything he said there is wrong. There can be no collective punishment, Lindsey. You know that, Lindsey. You've been trained on that, but you are literally the worst kind of American. He is the worst American possible. I mean, if there's a way to strip people of their citizenship because of their failure to adhere to constitutional norms and values, then Lindsay should have his citizenship stripped, and then he should be tarred and feathered and marched off to wherever the hell we send, failed Americans. But no, he's horrible. He's useless. But he's playing to a base. It's the same base that Nikki Haley's playing to, or Vivek. I mean, did you see that video clip where we're going to put 100 Hamas heads on stakes? Hey, that ain't how we operate, buddy. I know you're just an entrepreneur. I know you made your money, fraudulently peddling pharmaceuticals. But we don't cut off heads in the U.S. military and put them on spikes and hanging out there. That's a war crime. Marines got in trouble, rightfully so, for peeing on dead Taliban in Afghanistan. You can't desecrate the dead, boss. You're never going to be president of the United States. You just disqualified yourself right there because you're a war criminal in the making. So is Nikki Haley. Every word she says out there about tweeting is all about collective punishment, no concept of distinction, proportionality. What gets me is Lindsey Graham and Nikki Haley and all these other people sat there and they were citing the law of war, verse by verse about Russia and Ukraine, the Battle of Mariupol. This is indiscriminate collective punishment. There's no distinction between, when actually, and again, I do know the law of war. When I study the Battle of Mariupol, and I have by speaking to a lot of people who were there on the ground, looking at the evidence, the Russians actually carried out a textbook example on how to adhere to the law of war in the most difficult of situations. They lost a lot of guys in Mariupol they didn't need to lose because they didn't want to stand back and level a building with civilians in it. They actually assaulted forward to gain control of the basement to evacuate the civilians under fire before they went back in and cleared the building by hand. Again, under the assumption that somewhere upstairs there might be other civilians that they don't want to kill. They didn't go in there in Mariupol and level buildings. In Bakhmut, it was different. In Bakhmut, the civilian population had already fled. And so the buildings where the Ukrainians were in, there were no civilians there. And so now you can drop a bomb, put the building down, which they did. But in Mariupol, where there was a significant civilian population, the Russians ran a textbook operation adhering to the laws of war. Nothing about what Israel is doing today is textbook. And yet Russia was called out by everybody as being a major violator, gross violator of international law and all that stuff. The Israelis, on the other hand, the Americans, we're not even trying to pretend that Israel is adhering to the law of war. We're basically just saying the law of war doesn't matter when it comes to Israel. And that sadly is the truth. No law has ever mattered when it comes to Israel. International law doesn't matter. The Security Council has passed resolutions. The General Assembly has passed resolutions, and Israel ignores every single one of them.
Yeah. And the United States stands right by, just continuously rejecting resolution after resolution. And you see the split quite clearly with regard to where nations and countries stand on this, with China and Russia supporting humanitarian assistance, supporting an actual ceasefire, while the United States and its vassal states continue to obstruct, despite the fact that now they're kind of all have their hands and their thumbs up there, what's trying to figure out how to get out of a bad situation. Because as I said, the public relations, and as you intimated, the public relations around this are incredibly bad. I mean, so bad that this we have an election coming up, as you know, Scott, in 2024, and the Arab population in the United States has very diverse political leanings, but in very key areas, they lean Democrat. With Biden presiding over this, massacre, this genocide in Palestine, it's not looking great for Biden's political prospects. But you also have the media, which so usually, especially the liberal corporate media, just goes on and on and on in support of U.S. wars under Democrats. Now you have people like Joy-Ann Reid, and I'll play you this for your last reaction on the Palestine question, going against the grain. And I think this is pretty significant pressure on the Biden administration to change its course. But I'll let you react after we play it here.
And given these bombings are being done using our tax dollars, perhaps we should ask some questions. For example, how does bombing a densely populated land strip filled 50% with children constitute self-defense? How does bombing hospitals, churches, mosques, and UN schools constitute self-defense? Well, you say if Hamas fighters are hiding in the hospital using the civilians as human shields, okay, let's say they are. Are you arguing that flattening the hospital and killing newborns in their incubators and their moms in the NICU, cancer patients, someone with a broken leg, the doctors, nurses, and just the women and kids hiding in the hospital, that's not a war crime? Because you would be wrong, according to international law. And given...
I mean, Scott, that is not a common occurrence. This is obviously escalating a direction that most of even the mainstream war machine lovers, usually Joy-Ann Reid tends to be on that side. But it seems like the tone and the mood is shifting here.
Yeah, I mean, look, I know, Danny, you want me to keep these answers short, but there ain't nothing simple in life. I think people need to understand that the U.S. wasn't always, bought and owned by the Israeli lobby. There was a time when we actually had a very big Arab lobby, the Arabists in the State Department, in the Pentagon, etc. There was a time when, in the lead up to the Gulf War back in 1990, Paul Wolfowitz got so mad at the Israeli government that he basically, hung up the phone and then had his secretary call and give them a number to the White House switchboard and said, call when you're serious about talking about, settlements. But until then, we don't want to talk to you. Could you imagine a White House doing that today, hanging up on a prime minister and telling him to stick it where the sun don't shine? There was pushback. The name Jonathan Pollard, does that mean anything to anybody nowadays? He's, of course, the American Jew who spied on behalf of Israel, and didn't spy in a little way. He stole the crown jewels. The crown jewels is a big book of all the frequencies that we monitor in the world, and how important they are. What information's on it? Are they encrypted? Have we solved the encryption? That's it. If you got the crown jewels, you'll know that we're listening to your phone call, you're listening to this, and then you'll stop talking. He took that and gave it to the Israeli government. And then the Israeli government, because they're such good friends of America, sold it to the Soviets, who sat there and said, thank you very much. And we literally overnight lost billions of dollars of surveillance capability, because everything we thought we were doing, now the Soviets knew. If they kept it going, they were passing us disinformation. If they shut it down, we didn't know where they shut it down to, and now we're going blind. So Jonathan Pollard did that on behalf of the state of Israel. That created a lot of animosity in a big section of the American government. And so there was always this pushback. And at that time, the pro-Israeli lobby had to become very aggressive and very innovative in their tactics. When I was running around trying to get Congress not to support this war in Iraq, I would go to, the senator's office, knock on the door. I get a 45-minute meeting, sit there and talk. And as I came out, there's a group of AIPAC guys. I knew them because when I resigned, they tried to recruit me. They wanted me to speak at the AIPAC conference. They offered me bribes. They offered me the whole thing to join their team. All I'd have to do is say that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Well, I ain't going to lie. Even if you offer me $6 million, which they did, I ain't going to lie. So there went that deal. But they're bird dogging me going in, and they're reminding everybody, senators, congressmen alike, will primary you. That's their weapon, the primary. They write checks, but so do other people. What they can do is primary you. And a primary is a kiss of death Primary isn't you running against a Democrat or Republican. A primary is they putting somebody up within your own party and putting pressure on the normal funding channels to drop you. You have to burn through all your money to now do a primary you weren't planning on doing because you're building a war chest to run for election against the opposing political party, and you've burned yourself out. It's going to be a dirty campaign. All your dirty laundry is going up, and your other party opponents sitting there taking notes, and they're going to crush you in the general election. Primary is the kiss of death. That's what AIPAC does better than anybody else. And they go, we're going to primary you. And the long story short is eventually the Arabists were annihilated. The pro-Zionist lobby won. They were victory. They won. They own. This isn't anti-Semitic when I say this. Please don't interpret it. It's just a statement of fact. They own everything. And it's been a strategy that they've played. They own Congress. Benjamin Netanyahu brags about it. There's videos about him saying how he owns Congress. He bought them all. They all sing for him. He's a man of such arrogance and hubris. He came during a presidential election and spoke to Congress in a way to promote, Barack Obama's opponent. No one does that, but he did it because he doesn't care, because they literally have a blank check. Nobody held him. Nobody in Congress said, get the hell out of my country. I would have. That's why I would never get elected to Congress. But if Benjamin Netanyahu came to my house, the people's house, stood up and articulated against a sitting president during a re-election, I would have jumped out of my seat, rushed the stage, snapped his neck, and thrown his dead body outside, because that's what you do to people who interfere with your elections. We sit there and go, the Russians interfere. Hell no. Nobody interferes in an American election like the Israelis do. They have bought everybody in Congress. They own Congress. But worse than that, and this is where Ms. Reed's statement comes, they own the media. AIPAC owns, and again, this isn't the Jews. AIPAC. Look, I was there. I told you, when I resigned, I was recruited. They came at me hard from everywhere. They come out of the woodworks. I'd be doing a hit at NBC, MSNBC, funny enough, 6-month contract I had with them. And the producers come up and they hand me their AIPAC cards. Hey, Scott, we need to talk. Hey, Scott, we need to talk. Hey, Scott, let's have lunch. Hey, Scott. Hey, Scott. Hey, Scott. It is the Jewish lobby, not the Jewish. Sorry, that's anti-Semitic. That one you can hit me on. Okay. It's the pro-Israeli lobby. It's not the Jewish lobby. That's a horrible thing. I apologize for that. It's the Israeli lobby, the pro-Israeli. They are everywhere. They own everything. They run everything, and they all conspire together. They spy on behalf of Israel. Again, go back and look at what happened around the time when I resigned in the late 1990s, early 2000s. There was a scandal where a guy named Rosen, I think, in AIPAC, was conspiring with guys in the Department of Defense to get classified documents out so that he could hand them to this Israeli diplomat, the same diplomat that I worked with when I was at the United Nations. He was my cutout to Israeli intelligence, except I had permission to do that. But it turns out he was also a cutout between AIPAC and all that. The Israelis spy on America nonstop, and it was open book, everything. And what I'm trying to get at is, for most of this century, from 2000, especially after 2001, the global war on terror, the whole thing, until today, Israel's gotten a free ride. They don't even have to work for it. It's a free ride. All AIPAC has to do is open up a conference, put up a sign, and look at how everybody runs to AIPAC. Everybody got to speak at AIPAC, got to speak at AIPAC, got to speak at AIPAC. It's embarrassing. And literally, AIPAC doesn't hide it anymore. They are literally a front for Israel, but we're not allowed to call them that, or it's anti-Semitic. We're not allowed to say AIPAC needs to register as a foreign agent. No, anti-Semitic. AIPAC is an Israeli front. They are literally buying the United States Congress. And if you're an American, I don't care if you're Christian, Muslim, Jew, agnostic, atheist, I don't care. This should insult you that a foreign power has bought the Congress. Look at the new Speaker of the House. First order of business, ladies and gentlemen, when America is falling apart at the seams, homeless, you name it, we got problems. First order of business, I'm going to pass money for Israel. What the hell? That means that America is not even number 2. Americans are like not even on the front list. So Israel didn't have to work anymore. They aren't bird dogging people anymore. They took everything for granted. And they were on this smooth path to accomplish everything they wanted through the Abrams Accord. So they stopped working. They got lazy. They got soft. And then October 7th came in. And this rage that's been bottled up by people who felt so helpless, because if you were pro-Palestinian, and Danny, I think you're pro-Palestinian, but you tell me, you felt a sense of hopelessness and helplessness as the Abrams Accord took in, that nobody was advocating for them.
I think most people, as you said earlier too, in terms of this issue in general, it was not really in the conversation. Even right after the March of Return, when like kids were getting shot at for like peacefully going up to the gate, like by the even that didn't create the kind of, I think, energy that we're seeing now in response to what Israel is doing. I think there was this hopelessness around the Palestinian cause, definitely, and I think Israel's Saudi Arabia normalization would have been
Killed
a
it.
nail in that. It would have been, because I mean, we don't have to go into the itty bitty details, but we know that Saudi Arabia is a huge player in that region. For that to happen would be catastrophic.
Catastrophic. And so now what happens is nobody anticipated October 7th. So there wasn't a front loading of the Israeli propaganda machine. Israel was already in tatters because of Netanyahu's evisceration of basic law, and trying to take control of the judiciary, removing it as an independent agency. And so they're already on the defensive. You have a whole bunch of people going, well, Israel's really a democracy, but even the people that advocated for democracy are going, well, Benjamin Netanyahu's sort of destroyed this Israel. So the PR machine is falling in on itself, starting to argue against itself. There's a debate against themselves, etc. Boom. They don't have a plan. The whole world, they lost the script. It got out of control. The whole world's in the street and they don't know what to do. And so this is where you find out the true nature of people. When you strip away the pretense, when you strip away the scripting, the acting, and it just comes down, they're standing in front of you buck naked and they have to make a decision, you find out who they are. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to the reality of political Zionism, because that's what modern Israel is. It's not a democracy. It's not a nation that wants to live in peace and harmony with its neighbors. It's about the Israel that Benjamin Netanyahu has played a large role in creating. The Israel that assassinated Yitzhak Rabin is the ugly face of political Zionism, where they treat Arabs as animals. They view everybody as subhuman, and they don't care about the law. They will do everything necessary to achieve their objectives. This is the reality, and it's crude. I mean, look at the UN ambassador, the Israeli UN ambassador, how he is disgracing the memory of the Holocaust by putting on that yellow star, by parading around, by doing it. It's because they don't know what to do. They don't have a plan. So the only thing they can do is be honest for the first time about who they truly are. And it's pretty damn ugly.
Yes, it is. It is very ugly, and in crises and moments of crises, it happens for people, at the individual level. If anyone's been in a personal crisis, went to your therapist and said, "Oh, I'm in a big crisis." You have to make a decision. All of the pretenses, the walls, they start coming down, and you are who you are. Same goes for systems and in social orders and just things like Zionism. It's showing its face pretty hard right now, and the world is seeing it, and it is certainly something we're going to keep watching out for. But Scott, we have to talk at least a little about Ukraine, because I know you've been doing some work on this, and while Zelensky and Ukraine has kind of become an afterthought, I wanted to maybe jump off this conversation with your article on Consortium News, which everyone should follow, talking about it's called John Kirby versus the Russian military. You talk about how something is happening between Ukraine and Russia that has the U.S. National Security Council spokesperson desperately trying to prepare a U.S. audience for significant developments. Scott, could you talk about what you wrote? Because I think it's a good jump up for what is going on right now in Ukraine.
Well, sure. I mean, look, I've been saying this for some time now that I wrote an article, again, published in Consortium News in January, that predicted this. I said this year, just using basic military math, something I've been doing for a long time. Ukrainian burn rate in terms of casualties is higher than their replenishment rate. It's not just in terms of human, the human aspect, but the material aspect too. They're burning through armor, they're burning through aircraft, they're burning through ammunition at prodigious rates. And the ability to replenish, and again, it's known, there's no secret. This isn't a computer game where you can come in and do a hack and click on and suddenly see your resources suddenly build up. No. If you haven't planned on building ammunition, you ain't building ammunition. And we didn't plan on it. We ain't building it. Ukraine needs it. They're not getting it. So we built this 90,000 man army. We gave them tanks. We gave them all the stuff the Ukrainians said they need to carry out a counteroffensive. Meanwhile, Russia is dug into defenses that they're designing specifically to deal with the threat that we've publicly said. Zelensky, the commander of the Ukrainian forces, back in December, did an interview with The Economist where he said, I can beat these guys. I can beat them, meaning the Russians. We can cut through their defenses. And then he did something brilliant. We can sever the land bridge between Crimea and Russia by capturing Melitopol. Now imagine if I'm a Russian listening to that going, So your primary focus of effort is going to be an assault to break our lines to Melitopol. Guys, bring out the map. Robottino, Tokmak. Okay, keep talking, boss. I'm going to need 12 brigades. He needs 12 brigades. What do we need? Let's get a couple divisions down there. Okay, I need 300 tanks. Make sure a lot of anti-tank weapons, a lot of minefields. The bottom line is he's told the Russians when he was going to attack, where is he going to attack, with how many forces are going to attack, and the Russians built a defense designed to beat that. And the Russians, in addition to doing that, had not only 300,000 reservists that they mobilized, another 300,000 volunteers came through, in addition to their biannual conscription. The Russians are sitting on around 700,000 men that aren't committed to this fight, that are available to this fight. Ukraine just mobilized 90,000. They ain't got nothing left. So military math says you're going to get into this fight where Ukraine's already told everybody where they're going. The Russians have built this defense line up, and the Ukrainians get chewed up. Now, as that happens, as they burn through, because remember, before there was the Battle of Robottino, there was the Battle of Bakhmut. Does everybody remember the Battle of Bakhmut, the meat grinder in Bakhmut, where all the Ukrainian officers told Zelensky, let's not fight for this town. We don't want to fight for this town. Let's just withdraw from this town. We don't need to do this. And he said, no, reinforce. 70,000 dead troops later. The 70,000 that should have been available for this counterattack, but aren't now because they're dead, they're gone. So now he chewed up his troops there. He's put his strategic reserves here. They've gotten nowhere. They've died. They're all gone. Now they have to continue the pressure because he's under political pressure to keep those F-16s coming in, the M1s coming in. You got to keep that counteroffensive going, even though it's failing. So he keeps pouring troops in, but where do they come from? We have to steal them from someplace on the front line. So he looks at him and goes, where's it quiet? Kupiansk. Let's pull a couple brigades out of Kupiansk. Where else? Advika. Let's get some guys out of Advika. Let's bring them down and chew them up here. And the Russians are going, all right, let's attack at Kupiansk, where they took them out. So they start attacking in Kupiansk. Now the Ukrainians are going, oh, damn, but all our guys are down in Robottino. Let's take some more guys out of Advika, send them up to Kupiansk. And the Russians go, now let's attack at Advika. And now they're attacking Advika. And this is what's happening. In Advika, the Russians have rebuilt a Bakhmut-type scenario where they've surrounded this heavily fortified point. There's about 15,000 Ukrainian troops there. The Russians aren't going to shut the cauldron. Everyone's like, surround them. Why? You know what happens when you surround somebody? Now you have to fight on two fronts. You've surrounded them, so the guys inside are desperate. They're going to be trying to break out. The guys on the outside are going to be trying breaking in, and you're stuck in the middle. What's that old song from the 70s, Stuck in the Middle with You? You don't want to be stuck in the middle with the Ukrainians in a situation like that. So you keep the gap open so that the Ukrainians have to run a gauntlet of fire to reinforce. So it costs them to stay in. There's the temptation to leave if they want to, and you put them in the horns of a dilemma, which is what the Russians are doing. And they are grinding them up in Advika. Meanwhile, same thing's happening in Kupiansk. That's happening. And there's nothing the Ukrainians can do. They don't have any troops left. They got nothing left. On top of that, the United States has abandoned them like a bad habit, because it is a bad habit. We got the Israeli thing going. All that artillery ammunition that we're building up to send to Ukraine, straight to Israel. The Ukrainians are going, wait a minute, that was promised to us. You ain't getting it. You ain't getting anything. You're going to get $495 million that Biden's putting in for some fancy stuff that's not even built yet. This war is over. Russia has achieved strategic victory over the Ukrainian armed forces. And that's what John Kirby has to say. Just this time, a couple months ago, he gave us a presentation where he's talking about how the Ukrainians were going to recapture all of their territory and how we were supporting that. Well, he ain't talking about that anymore. Now he has to say the Russians are they're going to have some tactical victory. No, John, it's a strategic victory. They might gain some territory. No, John, they're going to gain a lot of territory. The entire front has transitioned to Russian momentum. It's the Russians who are dictating the pace of battle. There will be no pause. Everybody was saying, well, there's going to be a break this winter. So we and the Ukrainians can take a deep breath and rebuild and start all over. And the Russians are going, we ain't pausing. We're keeping it going. And now the Ukrainians are panicked. Everybody from Danilov to Arestovich to Zaluzhny now just gave an interview with The Economist that says, we sort of lost this thing. Zelensky's all depressed on Time Magazine. Nobody loves me anymore. I was man of the year last year. Now no one will take my phone call. I've been reduced to a Halloween costume. I think Blinken had his kid dressed up as Zelensky. Yeah. So that they're all this is going to the bottom line is the war. Look, again, people say, well, Scott, you say the war's over, but they're still fighting. I don't know. Do you think most World War II historians, when they look back on, say, the Battle of Kursk, would say that once the Germans burned through their strategic reserves at Kursk, that the war was over, meaning that it was inevitable. We know how it's going to end. And most people say, yep, Germany can't win after that point. I'm telling you right now, Ukraine can't win. They can't win. There's nothing they can do to win. And you're starting to see already the political pressure being put on Ukraine to accept a ceasefire, to bring an end to this conflict. The bad news for Ukraine is that Russia ain't going to end this thing on any terms that are acceptable to the Ukrainians. Russia will dictate the course of how this war is going to end. Russia has a goal and objective, not just of the military defeat of Ukraine, which is happening as we speak, but the political defeat of the Zelensky regime. Banderism will be outlawed. How that's achieved is going to be done through negotiation. Either the Ukrainians will say, we want to hold on to a semblance of autonomy, so we will work a change in the constitution to ban these right-wing parties, or the Russians are going to go in and physically remove Zelensky, put in their own government, and that's going to happen. But that's the future of Ukraine. They've lost. The best chance they had for peace was back on the 1st of April in 2022, when Vladimir Putin had signed off on a peace deal that would have given them all of Ukrainian territory except Crimea. Even the Donbass was up for grabs, meaning there would be a referendum, UN-sponsored referendum for them to decide their fate. Russia had no territorial objectives. They weren't trying to take territory. All they wanted was peace, and they wanted Ukraine never to join NATO. Should have taken that deal, Zelensky. You allowed Boris Johnson to talk you out of it. Now you've lost 20% of your territory permanently. Medvedev said if they continue going, this is the other important aspect of the Kupiansk battle, because it ain't being fought in Lugansk. It ain't being fought in Donetsk. It ain't being fought in Zaporizhia or Kherson. It's being fought in Kharkov. And this is the beginning of a new round of territorial acquisition by Russia. I believe that they are going to take Kharkov, and they're going to keep Kharkov. And then they will continue to push until they take Dnipropetrovsk, they take Mykolaiv, they take Odessa. This is the end of Ukraine as a modern nation state, unless Zelensky does the smart thing, which is to sue for peace right now. But if you look at his pathetic little performance in Time Magazine, this is a man who has, he's like an actor that forgot that he's just playing a role in a movie. and he's come off the set, and he's gone out to the restaurant, and he was playing the king, and he comes to the restaurant and he expects to be treated as a king. No, Zelensky, you've always been an actor. Last year, your job was to play the modern Winston Churchill, but we've got tired of that. We now have to refight the Battle of Israel, and we don't have time for your performance. The viewership is down. Advertisers are dropping their money. We're canceling you, Zelensky. We're canceling you. He can't handle being canceled.
Here is that cover that Time Magazine article that you're referencing. Nobody believes in victory like I do. Nobody. And then Time Magazine says it's been nearly 2 years. Russia still controls a fifth of Ukraine's territory. Tens of thousands have been killed. Global support for the war is shrinking. The lonely fight of Vladimir Zelensky. So this is the actual Time Magazine article that we don't have to get into deeply. But it is a huge shift in the way that the media is talking about this. Obviously, how John Kirby is talking about this. I think even just a few weeks ago, Kirby was saying this is the end of the rope for Ukraine. And this is only 1 year after, as you said, Time Magazine gave, less than a year ago, gave Zelensky the Person of the Year award. So the shift is stark. And, can the United States and NATO just wash their hands of this? Like, how will this go from here if, Russia is going to continue to pursue its objectives, solidify them, progress, and, the United States hasn't shown any inkling of wanting to participate in a peace process, and Zelensky, forget about it. How is this just going to roll into a slow defeat that's quite ugly, and it's just going to happen, and like a lot of times Americans will just say, oh, that happened, whatever, or will it be something bigger than that?
Well, first of all, let's look at historical precedent. In 2017, 2018, the Pentagon went to newly elected President Donald Trump and said, we can win this thing in Afghanistan. And Trump's going, well, dude, you've been there for like 17 years. Why haven't you won it yet? This is very important, Mr. President. This is about existential survival of the West. We have to fight the terrorists there, or else we're going to have to fight them here. And we need more troops. We need lots of troops. And Trump went, okay, how many do you need? We need, I forget the number. It was a lot. Okay. And Mr. President, our hands are tied by rules of engagement. We need to, unbind the troops so that they can do it. Fine. No rules of engagement. Do it. You guys do whatever you need to do to win. Okay. You want to drop the mother of all bombs on a empty valley? Go ahead. Do it. And a year later, he brought them in. He said, how's it going, boys? I gave you everything you want. Well, Mr. President, it wasn't enough. We need more. And he went, no, you guys are the worst soldiers in the world. You don't know how to win a war. And that's the truth. But the point is, the reason why I'm bringing this up is that, General David Petraeus, every general, Lloyd Austin, when he was the commander, everybody went to Congress and told Congress how this fight in Afghanistan was of an existential nature, that we had to stay there. It was paramount importance for the national security of the United States. We could not turn our back on Afghanistan. We have committed this path. We must continue. We have to do. Oh, shit, it got inconvenient. Run. August 2021, we left. And we haven't talked about Afghanistan since then. That's how important Afghanistan was to America. It wasn't important at all. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to reality. Ukraine ain't important. We don't care about Ukraine. We don't like the Ukrainians. If we did like the Ukrainians, we would never allow this to happen to them. You don't like a nation and allow them to sacrifice 400 to 500,000 of their own men on a field of battle. You don't abandon them like we're abandoning them now. We will walk away from Ukraine. This is an absolute certainty. We will run away from Ukraine. We will flee Ukraine, and Ukraine will collapse, and nothing will happen. Why? Because Russia doesn't care about invading nations. Russia cares about the security of Russia. Russia will resolve the Ukraine issue in a way that best benefits Russia, but doesn't threaten the world. Now, they will tell Europe that if you want to normalize relations with us, we need to have that discussion we wanted to have back on December 17th, 2021, when we handed over 2 draft treaties. We'd like to resume that conversation about a new European security framework and proper balance between the legitimate national security interests of Russia and Europe, maybe getting NATO infrastructure to withdraw back to 1997 lines, things of that nature. But Russia's not going to invade Poland. Russia's not going to invade the Baltics. That's not what Russia's about. And because Russia's not about that, when we abandon Ukraine, things will stabilize. We will have forgotten all about Ukraine. You'll be amazed how quickly all the people in Congress, all the generals, everybody who talked about how this is the end of the world, they'll never talk about it again. They'll talk about something else. Suddenly, they're all going to become Taiwan experts, or they're going to become North Korean experts, or somewhere else in the world, African experts. But they will never mention Ukraine again. All those generals who made their career fighting in Afghanistan, because understand that was a 20-year war. That means that there are general officers who joined the military and went to Afghanistan as second lieutenants and spent their entire career rotating in and out of Afghanistan, believing that it's the most important. It was their career. Everything they did in Afghanistan defined their career. They ain't talking about Afghanistan anymore. They're done. And I'm here to tell you right now, we will drop Ukraine like the bad habit it is, and we will never talk about it again.
Yeah. While the United States definitely won't be dropping its hope for some kind of future where Russia and China are not on the rise and any ways to contain them, that's certainly not going away. Certainly Ukraine is just a chip in that process. And if that chip is a losing venture, it seems like the United States and it's NATO so-called partners, they're willing to abandon ship as soon as it starts to sink, and it looks like it's sinking pretty hard.
You remember that movie? There's a great Al Pacino movie. He played the blind colonel, Scent of a Woman. And the speech he gives at the end where the kid is being, persecuted by the school. And, when the going get tough, I mean, it's a great, but it's the whole thing about the United States is just like that. Fake posturing. And as soon as the going gets tough, we don't believe in anything. That's the honest to God's truth. I'm just stating, we don't believe in that which we should believe in. We are a nation defined by principles and values that are enshrined in the Constitution. These are, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, individual freedoms, and all that stuff. But when you take a look at how we're actually governed, we don't believe in any of that. None of that matters. If we did, there wouldn't be homeless on the streets. If we did, there wouldn't be crumbling infrastructure. If they did, there still wouldn't be dirty water in Flint. If we believed in any things that we claim to believe, we wouldn't have this out of control healthcare crisis. The fact is, America stands for nothing, and it gets even worse when we try to export this lie overseas and to convince the world that America's the shining city on the hill. Have you taken a look at this place lately, ladies and gentlemen? We're a damn ghetto. We ain't a shining city. We're a ghetto. Take a ride on Amtrak and tell me how wonderful the ride. Danny, you were just in China. How are their high-speed trains? I bet you they're pretty good.
Yeah.
My point is, we stand for something that, if it was implemented properly, something we could all be proud of and should be proud of. I'm proud of the fact that we have the potential. As a nation, we have this great potential. That's what I believe in, is the potential of America. But we can't live up to this potential when we lie to ourselves and we lie to others. There's a reason why the world is gravitating away from the United States. It's because we stand for nothing. People say, what does America stand for? What is it? We're not even a good friend. I mean, I'm not saying that Ukraine is worthy of our friendship, but damn it, man, if you're going to sit there and say we're there for you, then be there for them. But Lindsey Graham, the great American idiot that he is, we're going to fight to the last Ukrainian. Well, that's pretty damn brave of you, Lindsey. Why don't you be honest with the American people? Why don't you say that Ukraine, I mean, this is what you believe in, Lindsay. Let's just say it. Ukraine is so important to us that we're putting boots on the grounds, that I want Americans to die in Ukraine, because we have to die in Ukraine, because Ukraine is the final frontier, the final battle. We got to hook and jab with the Russians. That's how important this is, ladies and gentlemen. Let's commit it all. No, he ain't going to say that because it ain't true. He knows it's not true. He doesn't like the Ukrainians. He hates the Ukrainians. He's willing to sacrifice them. But we're all about the lie, all about the lie. We have to start telling the truth. Otherwise, the world is going to gravitate away from us. This is why, there's this rapid rise of multipolarity. Multipolarity is the natural state of event in the world. Again, for all the Americans out there, all men are created equal. You remember that, right? Sort of one of the foundational principles of this country. That means all men. That means Mexicans, Filipinos, Koreans, Chinese, Vietnamese, Europeans, Russians, the whole thing. We're all equal. And if we believe in that equality aspect of it, then we have to be willing to work in a global community where everybody is equal, not where America is the boss. History sort of made it that we were the boss after World War II. I understand that. Sometimes that job is thrust upon you. But we had the opportunity at the end of the Cold War to hand it back to the world and work on building it up. We didn't do that. We tried to hold on to this. And now the world is gravitating naturally to where it should be. But that should have been a lengthier process, a smoother process, a nonviolent process. But because of what we're doing, the lies we are telling, we are creating conflict, and we're making this shift rapid. BRICS wasn't supposed to expand this soon. No one in BRICS envisioned this. Wasn't supposed to happen. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization wasn't supposed to be doing what it's doing either. You have these two very critical groups that are booming, and there's a danger in that because rapid expansion leads to unpredictable outcomes. You really want to do things slowly and gradually so that it's smooth, less friction. Rapidly expanding, lots of friction, chances for sparks. Sparks hit tinderboxes. Tinderboxes catch on fire. You have war. That's what's going on right now. A rapid backing away from America by the rest of the world because, frankly speaking, we suck. We suck. We're not what we claim to be because we have people like Lindsey Graham, because we have people like Nikki Haley, because we have people like Joe Biden who claim, Joe Biden's out there trying to sell democracy. Could you imagine that? Trying to sell American democracy around the world? Ladies and gentlemen, just take a look at we can't get Democrats and Republicans to talk to each other, and we're going to sell American democracy. Good luck with that one.
Yeah. And even in China, the regular trains are really good. So I don't know if you've taken the Jersey Transit or some train in New York City, but especially the Jersey Transit. It's awful. It's
well, that's why I was.
That's exactly what it's.
I was doing this.
Worse than that. The Amtrak.
It's a good core exercise. If you try and sit up straight, you can get a good core isometric workout resistance.
If you're standing, it's a good way to get a concussion because you might be thrown into a wall or a seat. But I was just in Vietnam too, and Vietnam is much poorer, but just the way that Vietnam has had to come out of the damage that the United States in particular caused, and to see how people are living better than ever, and also playing a relationship with the United States very smartly, where they want to be very friendly with the United States. They want to every last drop they can get from the United States, which isn't much, but they want as much as they can get. But to also see how, if you talk to anybody, but especially we met with Veterans Association folks, they will never say VUFO, Friendship Organization. They will never say we forgive. They will always say we're moving forward. So this is the mentality. I think it's similar around the world that countries want to move forward and they want to do it together and they want to do it independent of the whims of a single country. In the United States is either going to play ball or continue to find itself more and more isolated. And I think this Israel situation is a perfect case in point, because Israel is isolating itself like probably no other country in the world right now, and the United States is just following right along and hoping to prop it up. So I only had one more question for you, Scott. It was a Patreon member question. It can be as brief as you want to make it, but Fahim from Patreon, and this is a feature for those of you who are watching. If you want to subscribe to support this channel, Patreon is in the link there's a link in the description, but you can submit questions. And this is a very technical military question. And so I wanted to he wanted to get your opinion. So Fahim says, what do you think of the tooth to tail ratio of the Israeli army and the Ukrainian army? And he is referring to the infantry and cavalry of these two armies. So take that where you want to go.
Well, when you talk about tooth to tail, basically the tooth is the combat soldier, the tail is the logistics. Wars, believe it or not, are won on logistics. So the bigger your tail, the sharper your teeth is going to be. If you have, put all your effort up there in terms of the tooth, but you got very little tail, the teeth are going to get gnawed down. They're going to get worn out. In Ukraine, the Ukrainian army was organized under old Soviet era organization, which had significant logistics capacity, and they were designed to maintain Soviet era equipment. And Soviet era equipment was relatively rugged and relatively easy to repair. It was designed for that simplicity. But what we've done in providing the assistance to Ukraine is we have pumped in a whole bunch of Western equipment, the Leopard tanks, the M1 Abrams, the Chieftain, the M113, the Martyr. I mean, we can go on and on and on and on. And the interesting thing about this is every one of those is a distinct weapons system with a unique logistics sustainability plan attached to it. And they're not the same. So what we did is we turned Ukraine from this very simple Soviet era logistics where everything was interchangeable. I mean, one diesel power plant is the same, and it's just easy to support, so that you can have a balanced tooth to tail ratio, meaning that you have just enough tail to keep the teeth sharp. And what we did is we put in a whole bunch of teeth with no tail. And so we've given them all this modern fighting equipment. It breaks down. Look, the M1 Abrams tank, talk to any Abrams platoon commander out there. I probably some in the audience right now. And if you think I'm saying bullshit, actually, I don't know if I can swear, I apologize for that. If I'm saying BS, call me out on this. But I guarantee you that for every hour you spent in the field, you spent 3 hours doing preventative maintenance and getting the Abrams up to running, because it's a complex vehicle, requires a lot of tweaking and all that stuff. The same thing with the M777 howitzer. They found out when they went to the National Training Center, where the Army trains its units, brigade size, force on force type activity, that if you didn't pull a howitzer out for preventative maintenance during the war, during the training cycle, all your howitzers would break down by the time it was over, that you had to continually pull out, tinker, send back in just to keep them sustainable for the fight. And this is peacetime. In wartime, it's even harder. The point is, we had the tail to make that happen. We had to plan to make that happen. None of this transitioned to the Ukrainians. And so we've given them all this tooth, and they have no ability to sustain it. And so a lot of their Leopards right now, they can't commit the Leopards in large numbers simultaneously because most of them don't work. They're sitting there, trying to get fixed. They were sent in there. They drove them off the ramp. Boom, boom, oh, damn, through a tread. Oh, damn, transmission went out. We got to fix that thing. How? But where's our German trained mechanic? We don't have one. So we got to load that thing back up on a heavy equipment transporter and run it back across the border into Poland, where they have a depot set up where they're going to fix it. That's inefficiency right there. This is the whole way that we've screwed Ukraine. We've really screwed Ukraine. We've set them up for failure by this tooth to tail disparity. And it's the same thing with the infantry. The infantry is simpler. First of all, you need infantry. You've got to be able to, feed them. That's a critical aspect, is food. Ukraine has failed miserably on that because they had a minister of defense who is one of the most corrupt people in the world. He's now the ambassador of Ukraine to the United Kingdom. He has embezzled easily $1 billion. He was in charge of the food contracts, and basically he made sure that they got subpar food. And I'll tell you what, you want to piss a soldier off or a Marine off real bad, they're expecting something and they get something less. I mean, they've been looking forward to this meal for days maybe, and they're like, I'm finally going to get my sliced ham, and I'm going to get some cheese to put on it, and I'm going to heat it up, and I'm going to, oh God, for you and I, as in the real world, we're like, that sounds pretty gross. But if you've been in the field for a couple of days, heating up some sliced ham slices and putting cheese on it sounds really good, especially you can sprinkle some Tabasco sauce on it. So you're looking forward to that, and you open up your ration pack and you ain't got nothing. You got some mealy flour bread, you got some rotten rancid cheese, and you're sitting there and you're pissed off now because you've really been looking for them. Plus you're hungry. And combat, war, you chewed up a lot of calories. If you're taking a look at the number of calories in an MRE pack, there's a lot of calories. If you and I ate that as civilians back here, we'd become blimps. Why? Because we're just jamming calories in us. But in wartime environment, and when you're out there in the field doing something, you need those calories. So if you're denied the calories, you actually become physically weak. The Ukrainian infantry are in an extraordinarily intense combat situation where they need calories. They have to have calories. Look at the Russian food packs, jammed with calories. And some pretty tasty stuff to boot. I mean, it's done well. The Ukrainians are getting crap, and they're going hungry. So there's another tooth to tail aspect of it. Ammunition. You have to be able to resupply ammo. Infantry needs a lot of ammo. The Ukrainians aren't good at this. The infantry are going in with less than a basic load, which is the combat load you go in to initiate combat with. It allows you to initiate combat, firefight, put down enough fire to survive, for a certain duration. But as a good lieutenant, as you're coming in, calling up the company commander saying, I need resupply. I need a resupply now because we're in a fight. I need a resupply. Company commanders calling battalion saying, we need to get ammo down here to push forward to, to third platoon who's in contact. And they got, and the S4, the logistics officer already has that ammo over there, and it starts to flow in because they have a plan, tooth to tail balance. Ukrainians ain't got that. They're going in with insufficient ammunition. They get in a firefight. They use up all their ammo. There's no ammo left for them. They're out of ammo. When you're an infantryman out of ammo on a battlefield, that's a bad day for you. So we screwed the Ukrainians by screwing up their logistics, by tolerating this corruption. We trained them. And so we are largely responsible for this. Israel, they have, Western style tooth to tail. They have good logistics, very good logistics. The problem is their tooth. At the end of the day, the hard reality of war is it's the quality of the foot and the boot that counts. It's not the quality of the tank. It's not the quality of the artillery or the artillery piece. It's the foot and the boot. That's what makes an army victorious. The Israelis have put far too much emphasis on the quality of the weapons systems. And they've neglected the fact that the foot and the boot has to be attached to a body that is physically ready, has a brain that's mentally ready for the rigors of war. And the IDF ain't that body. And so they look good on paper, but the tooth is not manned by people that can get the most out of that. Because at the end of the day, you got to drive that tank into combat and be willing to engage in close-in combat. The infantry has to get dismounted from the infantry fighting vehicle and move forward in a coordinated fashion, providing support to that tank so they don't get outflanked. Why did Hamas come out of the hole and come up to the Israeli tank and destroy it? Because the infantry was still in the infantry fighting vehicle, because the infantry was scared to get out of the infantry fighting vehicle. The foot in the boot, that's the weakness on the part of Israel.
Well, Scott, that was very informative. You certainly have it down when it comes to military affairs. But we've been on for a couple of hours, so I think this is a good place to actually stop. A few things before we go, if you don't mind me making an announcement or two. So first, uh, I wanted to just alert you to first support Scott's work at scottritterextra.com. I'm going to put that in the chat. All right. And then, of course, before you go here, make sure you like the stream before you leave if you have not yet already. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the notifications bell. Also, find me on Rumble at rumble.com. I will put the link to my Rumble in the chat as well now, because YouTube has been quite repressive of late, taking down channels, demonetizing channels. Even my early work on Palestine before I headed off to Vietnam was demonetized or age restricted. It's quite ridiculous. So rumble.com, you can find me at my name, Danny Dhaiphong. I put that link again in the video description. Do follow me there in case things go awry here. Scott, you're no stranger to YouTube as well as X's repressive hands. And then lastly, of course, there's links in the video description where you can support this channel in particular outside of YouTube. You can subscribe on Patreon or buy me a coffee or on Substack. All of those are great ways in the video description links to support this channel. And then I wanted to alert folks actually of an event that I think is going to be very interesting. And bear with me as I pull it up. There's going to be an event on multipolarity. We just hit on that just a little bit today. But an organization, Friends of Socialist China, is holding an anniversary of the 10 years of the Belt and Road Initiative. There's some great speakers. Jing Li, who's a friend of the show. There's also going to be Zhang Weiwei, who's a very intelligent Chinese intellectual. Eric Solheim, who does a lot of work on the Belt and Road Initiative. Fred Mbembe of the Socialist Party of Zambia. And here is Broadly, who will be speaking. And I will put that link to the Twitter post where you can find that event. So and that's now in the chat. And I'll put all this stuff in the description. But Scott, anything you want to close with before we end the stream here tonight, before we go?
No, I want to thank you very much for inviting me. I know you're under the weather. I hope you recover soon. Again, I think it's an important discussion. And I would just tell people, don't forget that Nasrallah is speaking tomorrow. And
yes, I will be.
I think it's important for everybody to follow that speech.
Oh, yes. It will be very interesting to see what happens. And Scott, we're going to go here. So everyone, like the stream, subscribe, all that good stuff. Hit the links in the description. Follow Scott's work as well as scottritterextra.com. We're going to go. I'm sure we'll both be reacting to whatever happens tomorrow and be back with you again soon. Thanks all for bearing with my under the weather situation. I know I sound really crazy right now, but hopefully I'll get better soon. And I'll be back very soon, actually, as soon as a couple days. I have Norman Finkelstein on. Hopefully my throat is better by then. But I will send notifications out to all you. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.